You cannot buy a giant panda, not for any price. China does not sell them to anyone ever. What you can do is rent one. And the rent is one of the strangest numbers in the whole animal world. A zoo in America or Britain pays as much as $1 million a year just to borrow a pair of pandas, not to own them, to borrow them. And that headline number, the one everybody quotes, is somehow the cheapest part of the whole arrangement. So let's add up what hosting a panda actually costs. Start with that famous figure. The Smithsonian's National Zoo signs a 10-year agreement with China, and the price is about $1 million a year for a pair of pandas. And by the zoo's own account, that million is now the standard rate, the same amount the other big panda zoos pay. It was not always so uniform. Years ago, some smaller countries reportedly paid less, more like $250,000 to $500,000 a year. But today, $1 million is simply the going rate. And whatever the number, the deal is always a lease. The pandas and everything that comes from them stay China's property the entire time. Now layer on the cost of keeping the animals alive. Pandas eat almost nothing but bamboo, and they are wildly inefficient at it, wasting most of what you give them. Feeding a single panda runs somewhere between $30,000 and $70,000 a year, depending on whether you grow the bamboo or have to fly it in. Add the keepers, the vets, and round-the-clock care. And one American zoo put the cost of looking after its pandas at about $500,000 a year. That is roughly 5 times what it costs to keep an elephant, the next most expensive animal in the zoo. And none of that includes the lease. That $500,000 is on top. Before a single panda arrives, you also have to build it a home. And a panda enclosure is not a pen. It is a climate-controlled habitat with cooling for an animal that hates heat, special browse rooms, viewing galleries, and quarantine space. The price runs into the tens of millions of dollars one time, and it varies enormously from zoo to zoo. One built its panda habitat for around $16 million. Another spent closer to $24 million. You pay all of that up front, before you have hosted a paying visitor for a single day. And now the catch that almost nobody mentions. Say your pandas breed and a cub is born. That sounds like a windfall. It is actually another bill. China charges a one-time fee for every cub, and it has run as high as about $600,000, so you pay extra for the baby. And then comes the strange part. That cub is not yours either. Under the latest agreements, every cub born is China's property, and it goes to China by the time it turns 4 years old. Read that back slowly. You pay a fee to breed an animal, you pay a second fee when it arrives, and then you hand it over and watch it leave. You finance the whole thing, and you keep none of it. So line it all up over one 10-year agreement, the length of a single panda loan. The lease alone at $1 million a year is $10 million, clean and simple. But the lease was never the whole story. The Smithsonian says its panda program costs about $2.8 million a year all in once you fold in food, staff, insurance, and research. And here is a detail from the zoo's own books. Federal money only covers the basics, the food, and the vets. 74% of that panda budget, nearly 3/4, the zoo has to raise itself from donations, memberships, and ticket money. Run the program across a decade, add the one-time habitat on top, and the real number climbs to somewhere north of $50 million. That is a calculated figure, built partly on the zoo's own self-reported costs, so treat it as a careful estimate, not a receipt. The famous million a year was never close to the truth. Here is the question that should follow. If pandas pull in such enormous crowds, surely they pay for themselves? Mostly they do not. The crowds spike when the pandas arrive, then fade after a few years while the costs stay exactly as high. When one British zoo crunched the numbers, The Guardian estimated it would need an extra 1,000 visitors every single week for 10 straight years just to break even. Not to profit, to break even. And in Finland, this actually played out. A zoo brought in 2 pandas expecting them to pay their way. The pandas never bred, the crowds faded, the costs did not. And in 2024, the zoo sent both pandas back to China about 8 years early, then slid into bankruptcy. The panda was supposed to save the zoo. It helped sink it. So why do zoos still chase them? Because the money does not just vanish. That lease fee flows back to China and funds the thing the pandas are famous for. Habitat restoration, anti-poaching patrols, and the research that helped move the giant panda off the endangered list and into the safer, vulnerable category. That is the genuine tension. A zoo's panda exhibit can lose money for a decade, while the very fee that drains its budget is part of why there are more wild pandas at all. The bill is real, so is the conservation it buys. So what does a panda really cost a zoo? Not $1 million a year. Try $1 million for the lease, $500,000 more to feed and care for them, tens of millions for the building, a surprise fee for every cub, and an exhibit that usually loses money the whole time. North of $50 million across a single 10-year loan for two animals you never get to keep. So is it worth it? To make money, almost never. The crowds fade and the bills do not. But that fee flows back into the wild, and the panda is safer than it was, so for conservation, maybe. A zoo does not host a panda to turn a profit. It hosts one to stand beside the most expensive borrowed animal on Earth. Next, we put the animal that Panda kept beating on the scale. The elephant, the second most expensive resident in the whole zoo, and what it really costs to keep one. Every figure you just saw is traced to a named source, listed in full in the description below.